Just go through a quick checklist just to get your answer on a couple quick questions here. First of all, Republicans have talked in D.C. about a 15-week national abortion ban. Would you support that?
So I'm pro-life. I will sign pro-life legislation. But what I've told people as somebody that's delivered for the pro-life cause is, the country's divided on it. It's really going to be a bottom-up movement. I mean, you're going to have to work in your local communities. You're going to have to work in states to be able to bring about positive change. And that's going to take a lot of time and effort. And the Congress has not been very productive on a lot of things. And so while I'm pro-life, I'll be a pro-life president. I don't see them acting productively here.
So you believe the abortion issue should remain with the states?
I mean, I think in reality, that's what's going to happen. I mean, I will embrace pro-life legislation as president. But I think if you look at how our country's divided over it, you just have a lot of divides. And so typically when that happens, federalism ends up working its will.
Yeah, let's talk about Ukraine. Obviously, in the president's bill, we've got support for Israel, support for Ukraine, money for the southern border. What's the fourth thing? What am I forgetting here?
Taiwan.
Ukraine.
Israel, southern border, and China, Taiwan.
And China, that's right. China, Taiwan. It sounds like a pretty good bill, I mean, for Republicans and Democrats. I wanted to ask you, though, specifically about Ukraine. How should the United States move forward on funding for Ukraine? Do you support funding Ukraine at the levels that President Biden has suggested in this bill?
Well, first, just on the border, I just got to point out, he's not actually providing money that would stop the problem. He's providing money to process more illegal aliens coming in, which I think would probably end up exacerbating and inviting the problem. I gave a speech at the Heritage Foundation on Friday laying out our national security strategy. We are going to focus on the Indo-Pacific. What Biden's doing there is inadequate to deter China. That ultimately is the top threat to this country. I think Russia is hostile to the United States, but I think their threat, Europe is a more pressing part of their threat.
Right.
So we need to have the Europeans step up. Some have done it.
Some have. Yeah.
No blank check on Ukraine.
You're saying the United States no blank check, and I think I agree with you, and I think a lot of Americans agree with you that they shouldn't get a blank check. But do you support continued funding though for the Ukrainians, and if so, for how long?
So I would not do what Biden's doing, which is, funding pensions for bureaucrats over there, funding salaries. They're funding small business stuff. We were supportive of the defensive weaponry to be able to prevent Putin from taking over the country. So as president, I'm going to leverage resources. I'm going to get the Europeans to do more. I'm going to do more on the energy side. I'm going to do more on China, which, by the way, is the biggest benefactor for Ukraine. But I would not just send checks, because I think what they're going to do is they want $60 billion now, but I think they're going to come back at the beginning of the year next year and ask for at least another $100 billion. So we've already put a lot of money into this, and he hasn't really been able to articulate a coherent strategy about how does this come to an end. I think our interest is bringing it to an end in a way that keeps Russia in a box, but is not going to have us spend hundreds of billions of dollars for an outcome that's not much different than where we are now.
But I just want to confirm, because you talked about how you'd spend money there. You didn't mention, I know that you did support defensive weapons for Ukraine when the Obama administration did not. I'm curious, though, do you support weapons for Ukraine now in the middle of this fight?
Well, not only that, I mean, I supported it under Trump, and then I supported the initial stuff under Biden. But I think now the question is, our weapon stocks are low. How are we going to be able to meet all the contingencies? And how are we leveraging our European allies to step up and fill some of these voids? When the president gave his Oval Office speech, he said, we're the United States of America. We can do all this. The reality is we need to set priorities. We don't have the ability to just flood every part of the world. So I would prioritize the Indo-Pacific. I would provide support from Israel, and then I would leverage the Europeans to help with Ukraine and bring that to an end.
Yeah, but would you still send the military weapons to Ukraine at this point?
Right now.
I would send support that would bring it to a conclusion. I wouldn't just send if we don't have a sense of how this comes to an end. And what I think I've seen with the current administration is they're basically just saying as long as it takes, but as long as it takes to do what specifically and what's the ultimate end game. I think there's a lot of Republicans in Congress that are asking those questions.
Yeah.
And I think those questions deserve answers before they green light, another $60 billion.
So let me ask you this question, because I think there's a growing realization inside the White House, and I think there actually has been for some time, that we had General Milley saying this actually on the show, that the Ukrainians aren't going to get all the Russian troops out of Ukraine, and Putin's not going to get to Kyiv. So at some point, they're going to have to come together and figure out what the future looks like. I'm curious, what's your vision for Ukraine? Let's say that the boundaries stay pretty much where they are right now. And I mean, unless there's a massive spring offensive by the Ukrainians, this is what the map we're looking at now. It's probably where this is going to end, whether it's in a year or 2 years or whenever. What does Ukraine look like after that, as far as their strategic relationship with the United States, with Western democracies?
NATO.
Do they become a member of NATO? Should they become a member of the EU? Are they sort of a quasi-member of NATO? What does Ukraine look like after this war?
Well, look, if I could snap my fingers, I'd give them back Crimea and the Donbass and all that from 13 and 14. But I think just there's a reality on the ground about what's going to be accomplished. What would they need to accomplish that? Clearly, I would not support U.S. troops being there. So there's going to be some type of a settlement at some point. And I think the key is one, that Ukraine retains its sovereignty, and then two, that Russia is not given some type of a windfall for rewarding them for their aggression. And I think it's going to require a lot of action from a lot of the European countries, the United States. We've got to get more serious about energy. We've got to get more serious about China and Iran's relationship to propping up Russia. But it's probably going to end up somewhere like that. Whether they're in NATO or not, I don't know. I think that they clearly have value as a buffer state in between Russia and NATO for the United States. And I think that's the reason why we've supported them.
Yeah, and I would take it that a DeSantis administration would send a very clear message to Vladimir Putin that even if they're not a member of NATO, they come under the protection of the West. That we're not going to allow another invasion of Ukraine in the future, right?
I think it was a mistake when the president said that he would be fine with a small invasion. I think that green-lit Russia, and so we will be very adamant that Russia needs to be kept in its box. And we'll use different types of levers to be able to do that. And I think the Europeans need to step up and do more to be able to ensure that as well.
So let me ask you, while we're talking about foreign policy, I'm curious. You had said that you thought that Joe Biden should do better on China. I've actually been grateful that after we've had all these presidents in the 21st century saying they were going to pivot to China and start focusing on the Pacific, that we finally have started to do that. If you look at the Philippines, if you look at what we've done in Guam, if you look at what we've done in Australia with the nuclear subs, you look what we're doing all around. It seems that we're finally starting in South Korea, in Japan. Japan has agreed that they're going to up their military budget. It seems that we have finally started to focus on our allies in the United States flexing their muscle a bit more on China, stopping China's continued aggression there. What else would you do above that in around China, militarily or economically?
Well, I think you point out something important. You know, South Korea and Japan are actually getting along now. They used to never get along, but they both see the threat by China. What Japan's doing to bolster its defenses, I support 100%. In our speech on Friday, we rolled out a need to be able to enact a strategy of denial of China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific, and that's going to require more naval power. So we have a proposal to get to 355 ships by the end of the first term. term and close to 400 by the end of the second term, and put us on a pathway to 600 ships over the next 20 years. I mean, ultimately, the future of the free world is going to be determined in the Indo-Pacific. I don't think we're doing enough to be able to blunt their ambitions. And it's not just vis-a-vis Taiwan. And Taiwan is not just about semiconductors. If China is able to get out of that first island chain, that is going to allow them to be able to dominate the economy in the Indo-Pacific on the seas, and that will impact the United States of America. It will impact American families, because they're not just going to do that and then not try to export their authoritarian vision over the world and over the economy. So they're intent on being the dominant power in this world. If they get that, and it's a Chinese century, that will mean less freedom, and it'll be bad for the United States. So we need to stay ahead of them, not just militarily, but also economically. We need to detangle from China, particularly strategic industries. And then we need to get serious about what they've been able to do culturally in this country. For example, in Florida, we ban China from buying things like farmland and land near military bases. They've been very strategic about being able to exercise influence here in the United States, and we got to combat that.